Welcome to the Hard-Won Wisdom Podcast with best-selling author Fawn Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Come here weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network.
Hi, I'm Fawn Germer, and this is the Hard-Won Wisdom
Michelle
Podcast. Today we have got such a superstar with us, and I say this because this is a very dear friend of mine, and I just am always in awe of what she's done. Her name is Kathy Casey. She was a senior executive with Kellogg Corporation forever, and then took a risk right when she was just about to get that easy exit out of there, and became the chief marketing officer for Heavenly RX. And that has morphed into Pure K, which is now Simply Better Brands, which is a company that started with, what would you say, Kath, 0 customers and is now totally killing it. So
yeah, we're certainly proud of what the team's been able to do, for sure, Fawn. Thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to spend some time with you, Michelle.
Yeah, and she started as chief marketing officer, and I should say that soon was the CEO. So now I can say I have a friend who's a CEO, and that we've traveled the world, and she is the most unpretentious person you would ever meet, because boy, have we stayed in some dumps. But anyhow, welcome to our podcast, Kathy.
Thank you. Thank you. And Fawn, you have a lot of friends who are CEOs. Don't undersell your network.
I was thinking that as she said that. I'm like,
Yeah, but
world leaders, world powers, people and heads of cabinets.
But have those people stayed with me in the Galapagos at a hotel called the Red Booby Inn?
No, that was indeed a special treat. A cacophony of noises throughout the night. We were in the room on the lobby in a very crowded downtown, but we survived it.
But, you know, and people might think we're just yucking it up at the beginning of that, but that's actually a really good place for us to start, because Kathy had humble beginnings, and as she's gone higher and higher, she never lost who she was. So she is comfortable, I would imagine, in any 4 seasons, but she can stay anywhere and fit with anybody. And that's a really good place to start, is to say, tell us where you came from and how you never lost that ability to be real and be authentic and unpretentious and loving like you are.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. Yeah, I think early on in our life, our values, of course, come from some of the most important people in our life, which are our parents. And my dad was a self-made man. My parents had very little money when they got together, like many, many families back in the 60s. And my dad started actually as a janitor at a heating and cooling company. He worked his way up to be the vice president eventually. But one thing at my core, my father taught me, is it didn't matter if somebody was the CEO or somebody was the janitor. They were all humans. And to this day, I've tried to live my life that way, by the way, because it's true. I've met some really idiots that are CEOs and some really amazing people that are janitors. And I have one son, his name is Brendan, he's 23. And I've tried to raise him that way as well. I actually live now, we were just talking about, I actually live down the street from a billionaire, ironically. And I will tell you that you have incredible people in small towns, and we happen to have some really, really rich people in small towns. And that is no correlation between your wealth and you as a human, completely separate, just like successful careers or careers that people choose or have access to. It really bothers me actually when people assess the goodness of a human by their career or by their wealth, because there's no correlation to that.
You know, I've always thought that the amount of happiness available to us is the same. Once we know we have enough money to cover our food and shelter, so we know we're not going to be hungry and we're not going to be living on the streets. Once you have that covered, I believe the amount of happiness is the same that we can have.
And I believe it's a choice, Fawn. This is conversations you and I've had, over the last 10 decades. I mean, every day you get out of bed and I have a choice. Is it going to be a good day or a bad day? Am I going to carry something with me that happened 2 years ago or 3 years ago or 5 years ago? And I do believe that people have access to health, as long as they're mentally healthy enough and physically healthy enough to do that.
Now those billionaires might get extra little nudges to help out a friend, so they may
Yeah,
have
the
that
only thing I'd
extra.
say about money, and Fawn and I, we talk about money. One of the secrets to me in life is actually to live significantly beneath your means, because when you live beneath your means, you're in a position that you can take some risk. You can work through problems. You can handle setbacks. And if you choose to live your life in a certain way that you're paycheck to paycheck and struggle in that way, it really limits your opportunities. And I do say money does not bring you happiness, but money does sometimes allow you to do some things that actually will bring you joy. And that, to me, that's a role of where having some means that you've saved to earn the right to do things like go to the Galapagos can make a difference.
And freedom.
Yeah.
But I remember the first time you ever said that when I was moderating a panel, and how the room just went still, because so many people spend everything they think because they
Yeah.
can get pre-approved for this giant mortgage that they better buy that giant house. And that gives them fewer choices if things start to get rough. And I really thought there was power in what you said about living beneath your means, because when you've got a stash, you've got a choice. And when there's no choice, no stash, there's no choice.
No, and it can leave you in a bad marriage. It can leave you with a bad boss. It can have you not be able to handle a medical emergency. And to your point, Michelle, and not maybe be able to help out a friend when you really want to and you'd love to be able to do it. So I will say, when I've been married for 27 years, when we first got married, my husband's name is Dan, that was actually one of the core objectives was freedom, the ability to live our life in a way in which we'd have some freedom, freedom of time, freedom of travel, freedom of schedule, right? And we've tried to stay consistent with that.
You also have done a really good job of prioritizing your life and living according to your priorities, which came at some risk doing that. And I think a lot of people are afraid to make the kinds of choices you've made. But if you can tell that story, Brendan's
Sure.
little, and you have this awakening, what happened?
Yeah, I think like a lot of people that have long careers, that their careers and their jobs are important to them. Some people, their objective with their career is actually to work 8 to 5 and make enough money to provide for the family. And I have great respect for that. Unfortunately, I wasn't wired that way. I was wired that I actually wanted to have a really big career and invest in my work and try to find some ways where I could contribute to a company and build good teams. And I will tell you though, like a lot of people, I'm a failed human, right? And I say we're all perfectly imperfect. And there were many a time throughout my career, Fawn, as you know, and you've been with me on some of those, when I was working too hard or working too much, or maybe working under a time in which the environment was stressful and I couldn't manage my stress the way that I wanted to. And it's not hard to have it eventually affect your health, affect the relationships in your life. Hopefully you have a friend that comes to you and says, hey, you're out of whack, kind of get back to center. And there were a number of times, but the most recent one would be about 10 years ago, that I felt like my health was being affected and I just wasn't going to work like that anymore. And the irony is that, working harder doesn't necessarily mean, as we know, always doing the best results. And I calibrated back pretty significantly in terms of the work. And I thought, well, I'm going to let the chips fall where they may. I'm going to set some boundaries in a more intentional way for me, for my family. And it ultimately, if it affects my career, I can live with that. On the benefit of living beneath your means.
Right.
And ironically, what happened was that I did some of the best work of my career, because when you're able to step away, feel energized about what's happening outside of your work, you actually bring the wholest person to your job and are enabled and energized to do your best work without regret. I've heard someone say one time, which I thought was powerful, was, life is about triage. Decide where you're going to be and when you're going to be there. And when you're there, bring your whole self, because you're not guilty about being at a soccer game. And you're not guilty about being at work, because you're there by design.
There's a lot what she just
Kathy,
said, isn't there?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, I was going to say, just on that point, you mentioned you stepped back and you really had to sort of reevaluate. And I'd like to dig into that a little bit, because you came back, but you had to choose what became priority and what became focus. So how did you determine where you were going to put your energy?
Yeah, I think you have to. That, by the way, that's an amazing question. And I think that you have to really step back and find out what brings you joy in your life. And we get to talk with a lot of people throughout our lives that have great happiness and have great struggles. And I often defer to, what brings me joy. And I feel like if I did more of the things that brought me joy, Michelle, then ultimately I would be happier. Right. And what brought good work, doing really good work and building a good team. I'm a business geek. Like I love it. It's like a hobby of mine. And that does bring me joy. I like the challenge of going to work every day and figuring out and solving a problem and working with amazing teams, amazing people. The other thing that brings me joy is spending time with my family. And my son is my person, and every minute with him to me is sacred. And so that was non-negotiable. I also I love the water. I love to travel. I love a good glass of wine with a girlfriend, and I've had a couple over the years. But good support systems fill you up. They fill your soul. And a piece of advice certainly would be is if you haven't found your tribe, search them out and seek them out and find them. One thing I will say, it is about choice. And I have this conversation with some friends sometimes because I say, I personally didn't have with my work and my family, I didn't have time to nurture 100 relationships. I had to be really, really thoughtful. And so you get to a point that you're younger and you have different social groups as you age. But as I've aged, there is a pyramid, right? The group got smaller because you had so much energy, but it also enabled you to have the relationships be richer, right? Because you were spending more time with the quality of people in your life that you wanted. So I will tell you, it's if you looked on my phone right now, you'd see on my VIP list, it's my husband, my son, and about 8 girlfriends. And those are cherished relationships. And I, on a consistent basis, have to prioritize that's who I'm going to invest in. And also they invest back in me, and they're strong mutual relationships. I can show it to you on my phone right now.
Well, but it's one of the things that I love about
right here. Can't really see it, but Fawn Germer's on there. So you got my son, Fawn.
I am way up there. Although I don't know why Mary's above me, but I'll be okay with that.
Hey, they're prioritized by when they're entered, not by importance.
Okay. But when my mother died, you called me every day for a very long time. You are someone who is besieged upon for time. Everybody wants your time. And I always saw that as a model of humanity that I wish others would follow. Because it's that idea that you're never too busy for the people you love. And you're there, like you said, when you're there, you're going to be there. But as here was this really busy person who held my hand in the worst moments of my life. And that, I see people who don't have a lot going on and who wouldn't make that kind of effort. And so I learned a lot watching you with that.
Yeah, well, trust me, I've not always been that way, right? When as we talked about, I want to be completely vulnerable with folks watching this. I've made mistakes, I've made errors, I have regrets, but I think your life is always salvageable, and you have to decide what you want to work on and what you want to fix. And I will tell you, Fawn, there were times when there was nothing but my work. And if I wasn't working, there was my son, right? And that has consequences too, right? In terms of relationships. What I would say to you though, I was having a good conversation with a friend a couple of weeks ago. She has a daughter my age, or daughter my son's age, and it was about the purpose of life. Like, what is the purpose of life? And I think one of the purposes in life is loving people. I think really, truly trying to love people and make a difference if you can in people's lives, and share whatever gifts, talents, loves you have. But amazing it is when you truly, truly feel loved by someone and cared about and prioritized. And I think that's one of the secrets of life, and that we should all, whenever possible, try to do more of it.
Isn't that special, Michelle, when you hear
I know. I was just sitting here and thinking about dark times in my own life and the people that
Yeah.
they just show up. And so just I was very touched by
Yeah.
that story. And I know I think I tweeted yesterday actually because I just had a reminder
Yeah.
of my tribe and how grateful I am. My life wouldn't be near as full without these folks. And I think women in particular, and I'd love to dig into this a little bit, but I think women in particular, we forget to make that investment, and
Hmm.
then we don't know where to look for the right people because
Yeah.
you can have a lot of friends, but you've got the groups of friends that maybe
Yeah.
are they want to gossip
Right.
or they want to undermine you, and then there's the quality of friends that their whole
Hmm.
purpose is to lift you up and support you. So how did you find those right people that are on that call list of, the 6 of the 8 that
Yeah.
are friends? Like
It
how
took,
do you find those?
I'm freely open to say I'm in my mid 50s. I mean, it took me 55 years. I think of course, throughout your life, you go through different stages. You're young and single, you've got a group of friends. When you're newly married, you have a group of friends. When you have kids, you have a group of friends, and you have friends at work and outside of work. I literally think, and I say this to folks when I mention them, I go, you move away to college and you'll meet your starter friends, and they'll be your first friends, and you'll build relationships with them. And then over time, you'll find the version 2.0 of those friends and 3.0 of those friends, and I will tell you that it's literally trial and error for me, just putting myself out there, trying to build some very authentic relationships with people, and then ultimately see where those relationships went. I will tell you, it took me a while to not chase people, right? Because sometimes there are people that you want them in your life, but their priorities say that you're not a priority in those, and you have to let those folks go. So there is a reciprocity, I think, to make relationships rich. And I think throughout our life, we'll continue to evolve. I had a conversation with Fawn one time. We both have lost both of our parents. And she said to me, she goes, as I do this thing called life longer, I realize that you adopt your family as you age,
Yeah.
because eventually you'll have less family. And there's family that's blood, and there's family that's there by choice. And unfortunately, as we get older and we move, I've moved all over for jobs, and you have to start over all the time. Your circle, your tribe evolves, right?
I love how deep you are on all of this because I think a lot of people don't give that any energy. They just
Yeah.
kind of meander through life and meet people and do things. And clearly, you've done that kind of heavy lifting. I want to go back to something you said because we do need to talk a little about work here. But when you were talking about how, you don't necessarily get the benefit when all you do is work. And
Yeah.
I've seen some people over the years when I go into different companies who
Yeah.
completely live for their jobs and give it not 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week, but 80 hours a week.
Yep.
And they live and breathe
Mhm.
their work. And okay, I think that's a bad choice because I don't think they're really living, but if that is their choice, so be it. But I have yet to see people who do that actually accomplishing that much more than those who don't. Do you agree?
I do. I would start though with the first part of your sentence. If somebody wants to work 60 or 70 or 80 hours a week, and that's what they think their life purpose is, and that brings them joy, I mean, I would probably say that, Elon Musk, as an example, is probably one of the great innovators of our time. I would call him our Ben Franklin, our Thomas Edison. I don't think he accomplishes what he does in the 30 or 40-hour week, right? So I think it's where you started, Fawn, which is what brings you joy, what brings you meaning, what do you define your life purpose? And for some people, being the CEO of a Fortune 100 company is actually what matters most to them, right? And so I support that. Decide what your dream is and chase it. And I'll try not to have an opinion of whether I think it's right or wrong. If it works for you, it works for you. I have though seen a lot of people throughout my life, like you have, that have dedicated though too much to their work and then have lived to regret it. And it often comes because relationships suffered, their health suffered, and they've looked back and said, I wish I would have made a different choice. So I think the big thing is for me is just live with that kind of intentionality and set the boundaries that work for you. And that's different for all of us, right?
Yeah, there was an EVP at a really big company, and he and I were talking about somebody that worked for him in much in that workaholic fashion.
Yeah.
And he says, I just look at that and I think, why can't she get it done in less?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he said, and I don't think that she's doing any more with an 80-hour week than she would do with a 60. I just wonder, when you have a performer on your team who is overworking, do you say anything or do you just let them do it?
No, I say something. I do. An example, a story I told recently. I had a woman who was working in my team. I've always built teams of men and women, and I love engaging and developing women. It's part of my life mission. We were going off to a conference, and she was getting ready to miss her son's prom. And he was a junior. And she said to me, well, Kath, I've always got his senior year prom. And I said, no, we're not going to miss your son's prom. I go, I'll go to the trade event. I was going anyhow. I'll cover the meeting. You're going to your son's prom. And ironically, a year later, COVID happened, and his senior prom didn't happen.
Wow.
And boy, would we have lived with regret. I think people that work an extensive amount of hours, to me, I would say there usually is 3 drivers. One, to your point, it's just core to their values. It's who they are, and they love it, and they define themselves by that. The second one is they don't build good teams, right? Because if you build really good teams and surround yourself with talent, you should be able to have the work morph across the team that actually the work can get done without it falling on your shoulders. The third one is some people just really have a hard time delegating. They just really have a hard time, trusting the work to other people. And you have to trust the work to other people. Actually, you'll often find, I've often found when I built diverse teams and gave work to other people, they actually did it better than I did, right? Because everybody has a skill set. And, I would, if you put me in front of a spreadsheet and had me do analysis, I would probably pull my eyeball out. So I've always tried to find people that have skills that were different than mine and try to recruit them to the teams.
I think there's a fourth one from my experience, just leading people to, there's a population of folks that they don't want to be home.
Yeah.
They don't want to be home.
Yeah.
And so this is where they're all in. And it sometimes it hides itself as a workaholic.
Boy,
when it's something a lot cheaper.
I can see that. I also would say, and we've on, Michelle, you and I on had a session a few weeks ago. I would also say that, I call myself a recovering workaholic, but there is some truth to that. It's why you cannot define yourself by your work, because throughout your career, and I've referenced this before, I've been promoted, fired, hired, misogynized. I mean, many, many things that happen throughout your career. And there's times when you fail, you make a mistake and something goes sideways. And if you decide that your brand, your life image of yourself is your work, and your work goes sideways, which sometimes it does, not in your control, right? You get a company restructures and you lose your job. Your company gets bought and you lose your job. They decide to eliminate a layer of management. You have a project that went sideways with a boss that wasn't very understanding. And I've seen it so many times where people define themselves by their work and the work goes sideways, and then they've lost their identity and they think they're a failure. And that's really, really dangerous.
It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. And I think that, I think it's so important to something you said earlier, just to really about building connections and showing your vulnerabilities, because then I think you can support people as a leader to redefine who they are, celebrate the good work.
Well, yeah, and
but then help them redefine.
To your point, bringing it a little bit back to work, Fawn, ironically, when you actually care about people and you invest in people in an authentic way, people see that. And it's a great way to develop unbelievable teams in the workplace. It's a great way to be a destination for talent. So what we always try to do is and this is, again, not me, this is a bigger team, we try to recruit the best talent in the company. And then we'd have them come to the team, be a destination of talent, and then go and produce really good work in a culture that enabled people to take risk and do their best work. And ironically, what happens is there becomes this flywheel of then the talent in the company actually comes to your team because they see the results, they see the good bonuses, and they hear that people on that team like to work there because success begats success. There's nothing more fun than working on a winning team. And our rule was always that people had to be good humans. You couldn't work on a team if you weren't a good human, because good humans are good coworkers and they're good leaders. And so we sought out the best humans in the companies and we tried to get into the team. And then as they came, not only did they come once, but they actually wanted to stay. And then we developed these good humans into these other roles that they were still able to fulfill their career objectives by not switching teams all the time, because people then wanted our talent, right? And then they came and got our talent, which created movement through the team. And I think, like when I left, 5 of the women that reported me all got promoted, and many of them off our team, right? So because because people wanted the talent, right? It was fun. And again, I didn't do that. That was a team of 300 people. We had many leaders that were driving that kind of engagement, right, with people.
You said that your strength is not a spreadsheet. What is your superpower?
Well, it's funny. Someone asked me a little bit about sales. So I've spent most of my career in sales. I've done sales, I've done marketing, I've done training, I've done general management, of course. But my strength is actually, and we opened up with this, I'm a little bit of a closet sociologist. Like, I like to read systems and teams and people. It's interesting to me what motivates people, what's important to people, and then ultimately knowing that from a sales perspective, how you can influence people, right? Because you understand what they care about, like being home at 5 o'clock to have dinner with their family, or a buyer that knows if they make more profit, they'll get promoted, right? And so to me, I don't know that I have a superpower. I don't have a superpower, although my carnitas were pretty good this week, I'd have to say. But it's really about, for me, understanding people and human nature and what influences people. And then if you can come together where you can understand how to influence them in a way, not to take advantage of them, but to have, 1 + 1 = 3. And so it's really been about the ability to read people and then try to figure out how you could influence an outcome that was in people's best interest. And that's true whether it's customers or teams or bosses or husbands or children, right? To me, almost to a certain degree, every interaction professionally was a sales call, whether it was a customer or your boss.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So let's break that down a little bit, because I think there's folks on the phone or that are on that are listening, and they are, I don't know, maybe new managers, maybe experienced managers dealing with new people, trying to build, because what you describe is trust. So building trust. So what are some of the things that you do more specifically in having those conversations that set a tone of trust? I mean, it's not one conversation, it happens over time. But what are some of your tactics and techniques around that may be helpful for someone else?
I probably say this every single day of my life when I talk to our teams or when I talk to customers or vendors. It's very important that we build relationships based on trust and transparency. And transparency often means that you're delivering good news and bad news, right? But it's got to get out there. And so trust and transparency are 2 core ones. What we actually would do, Michelle, is whenever anybody came to the team and they joined the team, as an example, we opened up with the speech of good humans. And we opened up with a speech that, and I apologize, I'm going to swear here for a second, but there were no egos and no assholes. And it just, once you set a tone, right, that kind of behavior is not going to be allowed in the team, and you put folks kind of on notice, that's the culture of this team, you find out real quickly that people either like that or they don't like that, and then they either opt in or they opt out. And then every day the behaviors, as much as you can, and nobody's perfect, but as much as you can, you try to consistently lead a culture like that. So there was honesty, there was open communication, There was feedback sometimes that was hard to heal, but even bad feedback builds trust. There's also good communication around, I'll never surprise you. I will not surprise you. I'm not going to be the person that's going to walk in the office one day and fire you, right? I'll never surprise you. We're going to create an environment that feels safe. One example I'd probably get in trouble for now, but one example would be that I happened to work at a company once that we restructured quite frequently. And it made the organization a little unstable and felt insecure. Every time we had a restructure and I knew an announcement would be coming for a restructure, I got to my team before the announcement. And it was a way for me to say to them, there's going to be some noise this week and you're going to be just fine. And then when they heard that, they knew that they were okay. And it versus why would we put humans through angst that actually wasn't necessary?
Well,
right?
What about, because during those restructurings, there have been times when you've had to fire.
Totally.
And I have to say, it tortured you.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I think it's the worst. I think it's absolutely the worst. I would honestly say I probably fired 400 people over the course of my career. Some of them, 50, 20, 30, 40 at a time. Right. And it's always my worst day because you do something that impacts people's lives. Now, I will tell you many times, it actually impacted their life positive because they went on and actually got a better job somewhere else working with potentially even a company that was a better fit for them. But I remember one day I got a call from my sister and she said, hey, she goes, you fired my prom date's dad today? I go, I didn't know who you were going to prom with. I'm sorry. I mean, Charlie got a package. But, I think it's the worst because as we talked about, when we opened up this discussion about people being equal, I'm uncomfortable in a position where you feel like you have influence or power over someone's life. I think it's really doesn't say, well, those have without question been my worst days in my career.
But how do you, as an employee, how do you insulate yourself so that when those days come around, you're not going to be the one getting the chop?
3 words: play well with others. I guess it's 4 words.
Whoa,
I say to folks,
say that again. I love that because that is it, isn't it?
Well, hey, I can tell you I've been in the room. Again, this is going to be distributed, but if somebody does good work and they play well with others, usually when you're filling in spots on a restructure seat, they're going to find a job because you might even make jobs for them because they're really good talent and they add to the quality of the organization. If you don't play well with others and you create environments that are toxic, you'll be the first one let go in a restructure. Because often corporations use restructures not only to upgrade the talent, but to pick the best talent and keep the best talent on the team, right? And so I will tell you, there's been times when I have created jobs for people in restructures because I knew the talent that person had. And just because the box wasn't there didn't mean we wanted to keep them in the company. And so never underestimate playing well with others. And that's true.
Well, and that right there is screaming to the audience about this is why you better have an advocate, a champion, somebody that's in the room that is talking about how well you play with others, particularly if you're in a more junior role. Because if you don't have someone that's in that room to say, wow, this person does play well, then it puts you at so much risk. You could have all those qualities, but if they don't know it, and you can't always just rely on your boss, even if they're the best boss, you've got to do the work to build that support structure around you.
So that's good. How do you advertise that? Like what Michelle's saying, because I think she's spot on with that.
Well, it's interesting. I completely agree with you, Michelle, because your boss may not be in the room. Often, as you know, when you do restructures, and I've worked 30 years in corporate America, unfortunately, I've been part of a lot of them. When you do restructures, they're so confidential that actually the org structures usually come down from the top, and the placement of the people come down from the top. And often your manager may not even be in the clue, in the know, or in a position to advocate for you. And it happens all the time. Like, how did that person lose their job? They're so talented, right? And so I think it's what you had said. Find a sponsor in the organization. Sponsors are different than mentors, right? Mentors help you build your skills. Sponsors advocate for your career development. And you have to make sure that if your boss isn't in the room, that your boss is advocating for you. It's uncomfortable to brag about your own results. Humans, we don't like to do that. You got other people to brag about your results for you, and then make sure that you have opportunities to connect with broader groups. Get involved with teams, ask to meet and connect with other managers, seek out mentors and sponsors. Join some of the resource groups at your work, so you meet a diverse group of people that maybe go across function or department, so that you can expand in people that connect with you. So if you do get in one of those vulnerable spots, to your point, more likely somebody's going to advocate.
I think you gave some really great tips right there, just in terms of get involved in the ERGs, go out and meet with executives across the organization, beyond your man. I wanted to highlight that again for our listeners, because I appreciate this.
As somebody who has spoken to so many ERGs, those are the greatest opportunities to get exposure to people you have no contact with. That
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It's free advertising for yourself, but people often will go to those events and you might have the CEO standing right there.
Absolutely.
And they're scared and they don't talk to. I've gone to these and you see the CEO and the COO and the CMO, and they're all standing there talking to each other because no one's going up to them. It's like, that is free contact. That will help you.
Yeah.
As we haven't really gone according to plan on the questions I sent you. And there are a couple of these that I do want to ask you because.
Sure.
Okay. Looking back, what are the 3 things you did most right and most wrong during your career?
Yeah. I think most right. I start with P&G, and I would encourage you, if you're an emerging leader, or if you're still in school.
P&G is Procter & Gamble.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, is that it's outstanding to start with a really good company with a good training program, because that gives you a solid foundation as you go throughout the rest of your career. I have the career I have today because of Procter, I have no doubt. Good fundamental skills and a couple of amazing mentors like Lisa Olson, who made me the professional I am today. So that would one. Second would certainly be to build good teams, as we talk about, seek out mentors. The other thing I don't want to underestimate, and I wish I would have learned this one earlier, and I didn't do it, Fawn, is that there's this saying, catch a rising star. And what I've seen in companies is that you get a young talent, and that talent does well, and that talent gets promoted. And guess what happens? The people that he knows or she knows and trusts get his job. And then that person gets promoted. And guess what? He brings his same, and I say he, she, agnostic, brings their people with them. And then they get the next job and they bring their people with them. And every time they get a bigger role, they bring the people that they know and the people that they trust with them, because as they get higher in the organization, they have to have trust, and they want to work with the people that they historically have been successful with. So one of the things I would encourage, and by the way, I didn't do this early enough in my career, is that, read the room, see who has the power in the company, see whose career is going somewhere, see who continues to get promoted, and get on their team, get drafted. And what'll happen is you'll do good work, but as they do their work, every time they move, you'll move. And it's a wagon effect. And you see it all the time.
Such good advice. And it's funny because you think about when you're working at a company, and let's say they hire a new executive from another company, and then all of a sudden all their people come with it. And, when you're at that company, like, well, why do they have to bring their own people? But it's a great example of what you just described, Kathy, is if I'm going to go in, I want to win, and I'm going to win with the team I know and trust.
I left Procter with 2 Procter friends to start a company, and I left Kellogg with 2 Kellogg friends to start a company. Why? I knew him, I liked him, and I trusted him, and I wanted to work with them.
Yeah, always. Same with me. In
your career, you just seem so confident, but have you ever had to battle insecurity or the imposter syndrome?
Totally. I think anybody that says they're not insecure, I haven't met him yet. I really haven't met him yet. I would say to you that I have insecurities usually when I'm starting something new, which is funny because I like to start new stuff, but whether you start a new job, new career, new company, new category, new department, new function, you always start a little bit from scratch trying to figure it out. And I think when you show up at that meeting with the new team that doesn't know you in a channel that you don't know anything about, and you sit down and you go, okay, here we go. And I think what has served me well is just to ask a bunch of questions early on. No question is a stupid question. Be humble, be interested, versus interesting as it relates to the work. But yeah, definitely starting something new is an insecurity point for me. The other one is, I think, imposter syndrome wise, I think women are just really different than men. We're socialized different. And I don't really know why, but, women by nature, they're going to show up for work and put their head down and hope that somebody notices. And often men are socialized, I'll call it a more competitive sports type mentality where, the job gets posted and the woman's like, am I ready? And the guy's already in the office of the hiring manager telling you he's ready for the job. And so there's this P&G ad that says, run like play like a girl. And I think in this area, play like a guy.
So, in conclusion with this, if you were going to sit your son down and say, this is what you need to know in order to go out into the world, what would that lecture include?
I think some of them we've talked about, and I do have discussions with my son about his work. He happens to be, like a lot of COVID situations, he was working remotely, just graduated from college. He's actually living home right now. And we have, if I'm in town, we have lunch together every day, which is a great gift. A lot of them I've shared with them, and my son, a lot of them I shared are the ones we've already covered. Be a good human, treat people with respect, all people with respect. Play well with others, work hard. You're not going to have a good career if you don't work hard. You don't have to be obsessive and over it, but you got to show up for work and do really, really good work and be highly engaged to get the results that you want. Pick good mentors and surround yourself personally and professionally with good humans, right? Because ultimately that story that you are a product of the people that you're around. So aspire to be thoughtful about that as you decide who you have in your life.
That's beautiful. I know. I just thought that.
Michelle,
what are you going to say now?
I know. She just did. No, literally, this is what I wrote down from what I was going to say. I was laughing as you were just going through it because it was beautiful. I was like, the 3 takeaways are be a good human, hire a good human, and build relationships with other good humans. That sums all of it up. But you just really did a great job of bringing in some specific tactics and behaviors that our folks can go and apply immediately that will, plant some seeds that will be beneficial long term. And we didn't really get into it, but it's very obvious, Kathy, that thank you for being vulnerable and transparent, because there's obviously you probably had some pretty big screw ups to be where you are right now, to kind of have the wisdom in terms of the relationships with people that you shared with us today. So I'm glad that you had all of that, because it truly was very much a gift, and just it's been such a pleasure speaking with you.
Paul and I chatted a little bit about this. Everybody fails. Everybody trips, personally, professionally. And I think what the message I would send with is that it's all solvable. You can recreate the future that you want if you choose to. And the worst thing, if you fail is to not feel like it's recoverable. It's recoverable. If you're watching and you're in a good spot, amen, keep doing what you're doing. If you're watching in a bad spot, you can fix this.
So, well, thank you. This has been a really great moment. I think you've helped a lot of people here, and thanks for joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you for joining the Hard Won Wisdom podcast with best-selling author Von Germer and corporate innovator Michelle Brigman. Join us weekly for career and life-changing conversations with some of today's most influential thought leaders, senior executives, and trailblazers who will share their mentoring wisdom. This podcast is brought to you by the Women's Leadership Network. Visit hardwonwisdom.com for more on this podcast and for links to Fawn and Michelle's web pages and social media. Also, be sure to rate, subscribe, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. We really appreciate that effort, and we'll see you next week.